All right, let's get started because I don't want to wait anymore. Welcome everybody to this is episode 13 of Draw Me Anything. My name is Jason Chatfield. I'm a cartoonist and a comedian in New York City, and this is my Substack Live. I'm going to call it a show, I guess, where I mostly talk about the creative process and interview and talk with. I don't want to say interview, talk, have conversations with creative people that I admire. If you haven't seen any of the other ones, there's the last few weeks we had Ann Telmes, the Pulitzer Prize winner for this year. We had Austin Kleon. We've had Nishant Jain, Adam Ming, Claire Powell, Jesse Canalis Wino. We've had a lot of really interesting people on, so you can go back and watch those in the archive. But today, I'm really excited because I actually get to, instead of talking about drawing, I'm actually going to be talking about the other thing that I do with my time, my night time, what I do with my nights, comedy. I am getting to talk comedy with someone who knows a lot more than I do about it, and it's going to be a really exciting opportunity. Matt and my guest and I have met for 5 seconds at a rap party for Ronnie Cheng's tour. I think that's the only time I've actually managed to have any form of conversation. So this is really the first time we're getting to talk it in any depth. So I'm excited. He is a comedian in New York City. He came in from Chicago, I think. He has 3 stand-up specials on YouTube for 4 comedy albums. They hit the top 10 on iTunes. And he's been on Comedy Central, MTV, NBC, Fox. New York Times has written about him, and he has a fantastic Substack, the Rubes Letter, and Letters from a Young Comedian. Please welcome to today's episode of Draw Me Anything, Matt Ruby. Here he is.
Yay! Hey, it's
Wow.
me. What's up?
There he is. It's a great walk on.
Thank
It's
you.
I feel like a comedy MC a little bit. Give it up, but yeah.
Yeah,
You guys go nuts. Oh, come on, you can do better than that. Anyway, good to have you, Matt. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I've been reading your Substack for a while now, and the thing that attracted me to it was that you really get into the weeds on the mechanics, the bones of joke writing, and that's my whole life is writing jokes. And it's been really the thing that's really been interesting to me is when you go deep on research on a specific aspect of joke writing. So before we do anything else, I want to get everyone just, if you haven't already, there's a little subscribe button above Matt's name. Just hit that subscribe button. Subscribe to his newsletter. He's fantastic. Yeah, so you've been in New York for a while now. You've been doing stand-up for a while. You came in from Chicago? You were a musician in Chicago?
That's true. Yeah, I moved here mid 2000s and
Oh,
had been doing music and rock and roll stuff in Chicago, and then came here and started doing comedy.
that's crazy. Do you think your music stuff, your talent for music informed your comedy? Because the rhythm YouTubes there's a couple of YouTube I don't want to call them essays, what would you call them? Um just videos about rhythm as it pertains to comedy and the delivery of jokes. I feel like you have that. You have that very specific rhythm that you're able to conjure to sort of sell a bit. Do you think that is where that came from, your musicality?
I mean, I think it's something that I pay attention to because of that. I find for me with stand-up stuff, like the rhythm is sort of like the last thing that gets added to the mix. Well, rhythm and sort of like act outs and how to make a bit physical or to move on stage. Like
Mm,
usually I start with like the idea and like, what am I trying to say? Can I make it funny? Can I get a laugh? And then with repetition, that's a lot of times where the rhythm will develop, and then sort of like it kind of gets honed down. But I would say from my music days, probably like rock and roll as a philosophy has probably like impacted my stand up most. If I was looking for some thread, this idea that things are supposed to be rough and raw, and you're supposed to push people's buttons and
yeah,
maybe try to be a little bit edgy or provocative, or kind of step over the line or walk the line, as
right.
Johnny Cash would say, and how to bring that attitude, sort of like a punk rock attitude, like that. Not that I was into punk rock, but just that ethos into stand up, and I think you can see that in some of the comedians that I love most, and some of what I'm trying to do.
Right. I do notice that in your act. You do try to be, I guess provocative is a word because I remember you posted something as a Dry,
Hmm.
the thing like start by writing down what everyone else in the industry is doing or saying, and then ask what piece can I break so it doesn't sound like anything else. Um, and the result is lots of bad ideas. And he said, I'd rather bad ideas than boring ones. And that seems like your act is a lot of not bad ideas. Your act is a lot of like breaking everyone's expectations of what you're going to say, and then like that you can feel them tense up. You feel it, and then you're like, oh, that's what you can get out of this.
Yeah, I think the worst sin that you can do is to be dull.
Yeah.
And that's for me, like on stage and off stage. Like, just don't be boring. So I think being engaging and interesting, and then yeah, I think there's some amount of like a supply and demand idea that works with stand up too, of like, if there's something that everyone else you can hear everywhere else and it's something that everyone else is saying, it's probably not going to be great fodder for stand up. So you're trying to figure out like, oh, well, what's something that I believe in and want to say that I'm not hearing everywhere else, that's not being spread all over the place, and that I think is going to lead you to stuff that's more unique and more interesting. And then yeah, also just provoking, but not just for the sake of being like provocative, but because it's like a good way to engage people. And so much of stand up, I think, is like, okay, just saying something that gets people on the edge of their seat, getting
Uh,
people's attention, getting them, wait, what? Like, then this is something like Bill Burr, for example, is someone who I think does a masterful job of this, of like,
yeah.
hey, all right, wait, what did that guy just say? I got to listen to where he's going with this. And it's almost like sometimes digging a hole for yourself. And then if you can get out of it, it's almost like, oh, then there's almost like a magic trick element to it too, of like, oh, I didn't know where this was going, and then you really pulled it off. And then I also, for me, it's sort of like to not have people be able to guess where you're going,
Mm,
like, which to me is like true for a lot of art, but like especially with stand up, is like, if they know exactly what you're going to say and where you're going before you even finish, how great was it really? But if you can kind of like surprise people, I think that's at the essence of comedy and laughter. So
mm.
all those are kind of reasons why I take the approach I do.
Well, the thing about your Substack, and I want to talk about your Substack for a minute because you seem to have really found your groove with this, with being someone who I know there's a lot of other comedians on Substack, and other people who write about jokes and about humor and writing and stand up, but you seem not only like you're on the front lines here in New York, like you're getting up every night, you're a working comic, but you have this sort of like studious, almost borderline obsessive, academic almost love of the craft of comedy, if I can be so high-minded as to
Sure.
say craft. Um, can you talk a little bit about your Substack, about like what you've been doing there and what's been working for you?
Sure. So Funny How is the name of it's the full name is Funny How, letters to a young comedian. You can see it
Nice
at
Goodfellas reference.
yeah, funnyhow.substack.com. And just as a sidebar, I do have two other newsletters too, because I'm a crazy person, like the Roof Letter, which is mattruby.substack.com, which is just
Yep.
me sort of talking about like tech and pop culture and mindfulness and politics and whatever I want, basically. And then I also have another one called Working Methods, which is about like the creative process in general. But to
Mm,
go back to your question, Funny How is, yeah, I mean, I guess yeah, it's, I guess I would describe it as being about comedy philosophy. There's a lot
mm,
of stuff out there about like how to go viral, or a lot of social media clips, or how to book shows or produce stuff, and I'll touch on some of that stuff once in a while. But yeah, what I'm most interested in is like great stand up, and
yeah.
what is that, and how do you make it, and like the comedy that I love, taking it apart and see, why does it work, why do I love it, why do I think it's great.
Mm,
And also, I think, like you said, just being a working comedian in New York and having done it for a long time, and like there's just sort of like an ethos and a philosophy that I think comes from that. So sometimes I feel like this just like a representative or a spokesman or ambassador or something for a certain way of doing stand up, of thinking about it, of like what it means to be a great comedian, and like I think there's a certain style that goes along with being a New York City comedian, and like caring
Mm,
about writing jokes and caring about writing and having a point of view, and not wasting time, and not just trying to like act out stuff and get applause, but like trying to
right,
get laughs and not pandering, and like just trying to explain that point of view of comedy to the world. Um, and then also selfishly to promote myself along the way, and kind of like, hey, if you're vibing with what I'm saying and the ideas that I'm articulating, you might also like my stand-up a lot, so pay attention to that.
right. Yeah, you have a special that's just come out recently called Bolo, which I really enjoyed. That
Thank
was
you.
really
Yeah.
fun. It's up on YouTube right now. If everyone wants to watch it after this.
Yeah,
Um,
I
I
appreciate.
I have to say, one of my favorite books that I read last year was called "This Is Your Brain on Plants" by Michael Pollan. I don't know if you've read it.
I love
He,
Michael Pollan. I
yeah,
read This Is Your Mind, whatever the psychedelic one was, but
this is your mind on plants or something,
well, I thought there was
or
How to Change Your Mind, and then I
How
think
to Change Your Mind.
he's got
That's true.
another one maybe that's about plants. But
That's
I
right.
think
How to
they're,
Change Your
in
Mind.
a
Yeah.
way, all his books are about plants. I think Omnivore's Dilemma was about like
Yep.
eat
Omnivore's
plants,
Dilemma.
and then he
Yep.
realized like plants are what your body needs, and then I think he just zoomed out to like plants are also what your mind needs. And yeah,
Yes.
I'm a big psychedelic guy, and I've done ayahuasca a bunch, and part of my epiphanies from all that is that like plants have the answers. So I'm a real admirer and student of the plants.
Well, to a degree that Michael is too, where in that book he does mescaline, opium, and caffeine. He does all three. He kind of
Mhm.
really dives deep on the chemical and neurological elements of it. And so, in that vein, one of my favorite specials of yours is called Substance, where you go around New York City and you do the same set or different sets. You do one drunk on alcohol, you do one high, and then another one on mushrooms, and then one sober, which is one of the most fun things I've ever seen in my life. It's insane. Where the hell did you come up with that?
Well, as my friend Gina put it, it makes sense because you have your 10,000 hours in all of those things in,
Yeah,
in
that's great.
stand up and being high and being drunk and taking psychedelics and being sober. So I think, maybe more than a lot of people, I have a natural affinity for those things. And I think also a lot of times when I am like on substances, people are like, oh, I didn't even know you seemed pretty with it. And so, like, I think I'm pretty
Wow.
functional on all those things, although the alcohol one certainly went sideways. But
Yeah,
um,
it's
yeah,
great.
I mean, I think for me also it was just sort of like a good experiment of let's see what happens of and also like really going for it. I didn't want to just have like a couple hits of a joint or just two drinks or something. I was like I really like went all in on those things, and we did documentary footage leading up to the show on each day, and I think we didn't know exactly what we were doing, but in the end, I become sort of a vessel where you get to see what all of those individual substances do to a person.
Yeah,
And spoiler alert, my takeaway is like alcohol is like the worst
the
possible drug
worst.
there is. And
Yes.
that's the one that's going to lead you to the worst outcomes, at least in my experience. So, but yeah, I think it was just a fun experiment, a little bit of a stunt. Again, just trying to get attention. Maybe like influenced a little bit by like Super Size Me or Michael Pollan.
Sure. Yeah.
And yeah, just sort of trying to make something interesting that like captured my stand up, but also I think, is a window into me as a person too.
The Morgan Spurlock of New York comedy. Yeah. Um, I I did know. You know what? Watching the alcohol one, I started out in Perth in Western Australia in like '07, and every single gig I was very lucky because there was a kind of a comedy boom, and I could get up every night, and you would get a bar tab. Every show you'd get a bar tab, and
Yeah.
so of course just to allay your nerves and fears and everything, you just like, knock back a drink before you go up. But it's one of the most self-destructive things you can do before getting up because your brain isn't firing in the same, you're not as hyper aware. Yes, you're nervous without it, but those nerves actually kind of carry you through the set a bit. They serve you, a bit. Did you find that?
Yeah, I think, with most things in life, there's probably like a sweet spot where having
Yeah,
like a
yeah.
drink or two might help you like just kind of be more in flow.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, I think also like as soon as you start slurring, it's a problem. Like then I think, and you could see it in the alcohol set and substance. Like I like, especially like, cause I was like blacked out. I didn't even remember what I said on stage until the next
Wow.
day. I had to listen back to it. I'd be like, what happened? Um, and I think to me, I felt like I had broke a contract with the audience. Like
Yeah,
that
sure.
your job as a comedian up there on stage is to at least be somewhat in control of what you're doing. And I think I clearly lost that. And I mentioned slurring because I think as soon as the audience hears you slur,
Mm,
all of a sudden all bets are off. They're like, wait a minute, I don't think I should be trusting this guy right now.
right.
And so yeah, I think there's maybe a little bit can help you loosen up, but yeah, if you go too far with it, like then it's just and also, I guess I think the most dangerous thing about alcohol is that you think everything's going great. You think
Mm,
you're doing well. Like, oh, they love this because, compared to shrooms, at least, which I did the following week, like
right.
alcohol, I felt like was all ego. Like, I'm doing great. They love this. I'm just like, but in a way, I was just completely disconnected from them. I had built this wall where all that mattered was me. And then the following week, I was on shrooms, which I think is like complete ego loss.
Yeah.
And I was up there being like, "Hey, this is about us. What can we do together that's going to make this fun?" And like I said, I feel like that's a window into those two different drugs and what they do to you. How one is about like building a wall, and the other is about like taking walls down. And I think you get a interesting window into that too.
Yeah, there was a thread that ran through all of them where you just mentioned offhand at some point about that covenant with the audience that like everyone, except when you were drunk. You didn't, I don't think you mentioned it
Yeah.
when you were drunk.
Well, also to like usually at a stand-up special, like the audience knows they're at a special. They know they're being
Yeah,
filmed. They know who they're going to see. This was just sort of random shows in New York where the audience didn't know what was happening. They didn't know I was going to be on a substance until the host would just introduce me and not even tell them what I was on, but just tell them what the project was. So everyone
right.
was kind of being blindsided by this. So there was no like, "Hey, we're on your side. We know what we're getting into." It was just sort of like out of nowhere. So I think that was added to the tension of the whole thing.
Yeah, and then the first thing you say when you walk up is, "Can you tell?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Like which one? And I think, it's interesting. You actually can't. For mushrooms and weed, you kind of can't. I
Yeah.
mean, you're pretty like that. You're there, very present and whatever. I think you're right. I think the most toxic drug of all for doing stand up is alcohol. It's wild, and yet it's the most prevalent, which is well, it's comedies in bars.
Yeah. And
Everything's a
also, I
minimum,
will I will say I have a lot of experience being high and on shrooms, and so that probably helps compared to a
Yeah,
lot of other people. It might not be ideal for them, but like
yeah.
I'm okay with that.
You got your 10,000 hours. I actually wanted to talk to you about something kind of adjacent because it's something you've mentioned before in your writing that always I kind of gravitated towards because I have been doing it as well for a long time, and that is sort of mindfulness and meditation. I work on the Waking Up app with Sam Harris, and that whole world of not in a culty way, not in a religious way or spiritual way, but in very much in just like a neurological curiosity. I've been meditating since 2013, however long that is. But you've been doing it a lot longer. And you mentioned that your mum, she was in the Lower East Side in the 80s, the
60.
90s, like 60s. Wow. And had like, and you said you had a meditation room growing up, which was such a like a weird thing to have
Yeah. Mom
back
had a meditation
then.
room. No,
Yeah.
yeah, my joke about my mom had a meditation room when I was growing up, and
Yeah.
I remember the first time I ever smoked weed. I was like, "Wow, this smells a lot like my mom's meditation," which is a true
Yeah.
story. So
Of course. I mean, that time in the Lower East Side as well. Holy crap. I mean, I lived down there for 7.5 years in a co-op, artist co-op. They were all squatters on Avenue C. And they basically, it was called Bullet Space. It's like an artist co-op. And you had to make your living as an artist to live there. And a lot of the stories that came out of like, I mean, I think they did write a book. I was going to say you could write a book. They did. Where at that time, it was kind of no man's land. It was just this crazy, all the artists and like it was such an insane place to be. You wouldn't go down there without a weapon or something, but it just it the stress and the pressure of that place and the craziness of it just like bred some of the most incredible poets and musicians and artists in living memory.
and just the pinball machine effect of all those people being together and bouncing off each
Yes.
other. And yeah, like you said, the musicians hanging out with the artists, hanging out with filmmakers. I mean, especially when my mom was doing stuff in the 60s, it was, the Velvet Underground, hanging out with
Yeah.
Ginsberg, hanging out with Jonas Mekas, and like, Andy Warhol had the Factory going on at the same time, and Yoko Ono, and so you have all these different, like this cross pollination, I think, going on. Brian Eno talks about this genius. I
Yes.
know you had
Yeah.
Leon on. He writes about it sometimes. This idea that we have this idea of like the isolated artist, the lone wolf sort of genius doing it on their own, but like so much what happens usually in reality is like a scene where people are like bubbling up and coming up together, and ideas are bouncing off each other. And yeah, I think especially in that time, that's what you had in Lower East Side and East Village, and this real like sort of bohemian scene. And I think it's, to me, it's part of what's sad about, Manhattan now is all,
Yeah.
condos and Bank of America and, private social clubs and all this stuff. And like, so a lot of the artists have been pushed out to, Ridgewood or Bushwick or places like that.
Hmm.
Um, and I think part of what you lose is just that geographic proximity of people being,
Yes.
sort of forced together in a way that they're bouncing off each other as everything spreads out or people get pushed to the periphery. I feel like you lose some of that. And then, of course, in addition to everyone being on screens all the time, I think there's just less interaction in the way of like you used to have at CBGB's or Max's Kansas City,
Yeah.
places where, or even when
Yeah.
I started doing comedy at Rafifi, there used to be, cool, like sort of alternative comedy shows at Rafifi, this video store that had a bar.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
after the show, everyone would just hang out, and there'd be like this great hang of like comedians who were on the show, newer comedians, people who just wanted to, be in the scene or hang out. And I just feel like that happens less and less now, where everyone's just sort of in their silos. Even when you go to a comedy, show, people do their spot and then they leave afterwards. It just seems like the hang isn't as much of a thing as it used to be, which is a bummer because I think that's where a lot of that, sort of serendipity, and interactions happen.
That's kind of how I got into it. And was because I was doing the hang and then
Yeah.
felt like a complete imposter, and then eventually got the guts to do the thing. And then I still love the hang more than anything. But I think I learned more. Some nights I learned more about comedy from the hang than I did from the show that night, the spot. And in the green room, now it's a lot of comics just kind of huddled over their
Yeah.
phones in the green room, in their DMs and whatever. But then it used to just be people busting balls and zinging and zanging. It was an interesting vibe in that little pressurized green room,
Sure.
and
Well,
then afterwards on the street.
yeah. Also, and since you're into like sort of the creative process and stuff,
Yeah,
like for me, as far as like joke writing, a lot of my favorite jokes or ideas for jokes don't come from like sitting down at a laptop or writing,
yeah,
or like it comes from like having conversations with like cool, interesting, smart, funny people, whether they're friends or other comedians or whoever it is. And
yeah,
then just sort of like, talking about stuff that you actually care about, that you talk about, you're in real life. So you talk about stuff that you care about in real life. And then every once in a while, something just comes out and you're like, wait a minute, that's funny. Or if it's a comedian, a lot of times they'll tell you, hey, that's a bit, write that down.
yeah.
And I think there's something about the origin story of jokes like that it came from like a real life conversation that you were having with someone,
Hmm.
uh, is something that the audience can perceive on stage. There's sort of like this unification theory of some sort where it's like, oh, this is who you really, people talk about finding your voice, like that
Yeah.
is your voice, that's who you are. You're off stage just having some drinks with a friend of yours and it's what's coming out of you, that's who you are. And so if your material is coming out of that same source, and obviously you've got a good punchline and you make it funny, like
Yeah.
that to me is sort of like the holy grail of a good stand-up comedy joke, where it's like, oh, that was funny and interesting and is like a point I hadn't thought of, and it's who this person really is. And like, I think there's just sort of some harmony that goes on when a joke arises that way that the audience can perceive.
I never thought of it that way. That's absolutely right. It's the most authentic thing, is that you're not putting on an act. You're not putting on anything when you're just hanging out and talking shop. And
It's
well,
who you are, and
yeah,
that's
yeah,
what an audience wants most of all, is like it.
authenticity.
Yeah, unless you're doing a character thing or something, but
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah,
in general,
yeah,
I think that's what people are craving, from most art in general. I mean, a like
right.
related notion is like, this is something I've heard Chris Rock say, which is, if there's any thing that you've talked about three times in your life with like someone else, with a friend or anyone else, try talking about it on stage,
Wow.
because it's
Yeah,
something that you clearly care about. And
Yeah.
like that's so much the battle is like, well, what do you actually care about? And if you care about it, that's what an audience wants. They'll just gravitate to someone who's talking about stuff they actually care about versus someone who's pandering or someone who's like, well, this is the trending topic of the day, so I have to
Yeah.
do a bit on it. Um, or crowd work stuff. I mean, all of that stuff can work, but like I said, I think there's sort of like this holy grail of what you're going for. And if it's coming from that place of like, hey, this person really cares about what, even if it's something dumb or silly, but like you care about it, that's
Yeah.
gonna help a bit get over, and it's also going to be something the audience likes.
Yeah, that's so cool. I just really it happened today. I was talking to a comic today, and I was just explaining something that happened to me, and she said that's a bit, and I was like, is it? I just and I'm doing the new jokes at West Side Comedy
Yeah.
Club tonight, and I'm like I'm going through stuff that I want to try, and I was like, oh crap, I guess I'll throw that in. But it is one of those things that like I've never been able to identify in myself what's a bit. It's usually another comic going that's a bit, and also the what I care about. It's usually someone else going, "Boy, you seem to talk about this a lot." Yeah, like it's one of those things, and not in a way that's like, "Boy, you talk about comedy a lot. Get up there and do bits about comedy." I think every tag, all my favorite tags came from another comic going, "Hey," like back when people used to stick around and watch your set. Uh, they would go, I got to, if you want, is try this tag for that bit, or that, or I would think of a tag for someone else's bit, and you just kind of throw things around, and you're right. It is that scenius thing. It's that kind of like everyone coming up together and bouncing off each other like particles and creating that energy. Who did you come up with in New York? Like, who was your school? Were you like the Norman List, Morel
Yep. Yep.
era?
Yeah. Mark Norman, Joe List, Sam
Yep.
Morril, John Donnelly,
Yep.
Mike Lawrence, a bunch of other people, Sean Patton, Jesse Pop, a lot of people who've gone on to, different things now, but there's like the Kingdom of Heaven, Mike at the Creek in the Cave,
Of course. Yeah.
and Ochi's at the bottom of comics, and Cabin on
On
Wednesday
third.
night.
Oh my
And
God.
yeah, so
R.I.P.
like, just sort of that whole scene of what was happening. This was like, l-
Yeah.
2010 era,
Yeah.
sort
The
of.
Rebecca Trent booking era. Yeah.
Just to backtrack for a second, since
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
a meditation guy too, and talking about that Chris Rock thing of if you talk about something three times, bring it on stage.
Yeah.
I think what that has in common with meditation is the idea of what keeps arising. Like to me, a
Right.
huge part of meditation is like not necessarily like the when you're thinking about nothing, but what keeps coming up over and over again to distract you. What does your brain keep firing at you? And to notice that, and that's revealing something about you and who you really are, and not necessarily whether it's good or bad, but just like being aware of like, huh, my brain keeps really wanting me to think about that thing. Is that good? Is that helping me? Like sometimes it can be anxiety, worry. Like my brain really
Yeah.
wants me to worry about this thing. And eventually like, well, is me worrying about it all the time helping? Or is it just, some animal thing that my brain is trying to get me to do? And maybe I don't have to be a slave to that.
Mm.
So I think there's something related in those realms of like noticing what's arising in a continual way.
Yeah, no, that's kind of what I was hoping you would say about that because um I know that you've been meditating for a while, but it is everyone has like a different approach to it and a different opinion about it. Some people use apps, some people do TM, some people do. I know Jerry does TM. I know there's different comedians who have a different practice, and there is a correlation. There are a lot of like I know Joe List does a lot of meditation and mindfulness stuff. He's a big fan of like Sam Harris and Thich Nhat Hanh and there's these guys, but it's one of these and it's not just the sober comedians. It's everyone that seems to have that as a because I feel like comedy is kind of also I guess marshaling enough of your attention of your mind of what you're actually thinking, seeing thoughts and identifying them, and identifying them as thoughts or repetitive thoughts or destructive thoughts or whatever they are, and then doing something with them or just letting them go. Like it's a hard, really hard skill to master.
Yeah. I also, increasingly, I feel like it's the antidote to being online and on screens all the time.
Mm, yeah,
Like, put your phone down and actually like sit with your own brain for, 20 minutes or however long. And like, and I think, anyone making art it's going to be helpful instead of reacting to something that's being fed to you,
yeah,
like being in a generative spot place where Yeah, I guess this used to be daydreaming. Like we've
Yeah.
eliminated daydreaming because we just have this IV drip of content available to us at all times. And so I think, meditation maybe is a way to access that because we don't do it anymore. This idea of like, well, what happens when your brain doesn't have any stimulation, when you're just left to, wander and wonder,
Mhm.
um,
Right.
and what happens and what comes up. And so I think that's healthy, and then also healthy for making art or writing jokes or figuring out who you are, like, and also just
Yeah.
being like a calm, reasonable human being and not insane.
It's the Blaise Pascal thing of most of man's troubles stem from his inability to sit alone in a room.
Yep, great
It
line.
also reminds me of that Norman bit. It's a pretty old bit now, where he's like, "Hey, left the house the other day without my headphones. Ugh, thoughts are bad."
Yeah, it's
Just
what's that? He's got a great line in that. It's a real Japanese game show up here,
that's
which I always thought was a
right.
great line.
That's such a great visual. Oh my God. Yeah. So in the second half of this, I always kind of flip the camera so people aren't staring at my dumb face, and I just scribble. I actually think better and clearer while I'm drawing. It's kind of it's kind not to get too hippy dippy about it, but it's kind of a meditation of my own. But I'm still, even though you're not looking at me, I am still very much listening and paying as
I
much,
have
if not
faith
more,
that you are
attention.
still paying attention and that you are capable of multitasking.
I mean, your faith is arguably misplaced, but let's see. What I wanted to ask you about was really also anyone in the chat, if you have requests, I do look at the chat. If you want me to draw anything, ask. Otherwise, I'm just going to doodle away. There was a Mike Birbiglia interview that you posted a little while ago, and I think he was with Ari. No, who was he with? With um,
Ira Glass.
Ira Glass. It was a really good episode. It was a really nice
Yeah, it's a great
chat.
show. Working It Out podcast by
Yeah,
Mike Birbiglia. I think it's a good resource.
it is a great resource. And yeah, because he was saying, like, I think Ira was talking about his dad and dementia, and then they were trying to pull it apart and find the funny in that.
Yeah,
But also there was a real nugget in there, which was like Mike saying, would I laugh at this? Like, don't think
yeah,
what would the audience laugh at? Like, would I find this funny? Do I find this funny? Which is such a, like, you see people starting out just going, like, seeing what's getting laughs and then trying to replicate it, trying to reverse engineer it around, oh, maybe I can do a bit about that. It's like, well, yeah, but if you don't care about it, people are going to be able to tell. And do you even find that funny?
totally. Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes to extend that to life, like sometimes I have to force myself to remember, like, do I actually want to be doing this right now? like, or if I get invited to something, I have to like stop and be like, do I actually want to go? Do I want to
Right.
be there? Like, even within a relationship, do I want to be in this relationship? Like there's so much of life where we're just sort of on autopilot or, doing things because of inertia. And I think sometimes it's
Huh.
healthy to remember to check in with yourself and be like, well, what do I actually want? Because
Right.
so much of life that will just happen to you unless you sort of actively make a choice to pursue what you want to pursue. But yeah, and I think there's like, if all you're doing is trying to please the audience all the time, you'll probably just wind up being a hack or kind of pandering or like
Yeah.
doing stuff that gets clapter. And I think there's sort of like what actually makes you laugh or what do you think is funny is a good way of being like, well, at the end of the day, on some level, you're also doing this for yourself.
Yeah.
I
Right.
think the difference between being an artist and a designer is like there's some amount of selfishness here. You're not just, being hired by a client to create what they want you to. You're trying to express yourself in some way. And I think keeping that in mind and then also remembering sometimes the path to the universal is through the personal. So sometimes
Right.
there might be something that happened to you in your life or something that's about your relationship with your parents or whatever it is. And you'd be like, no one else has ever gone through that, so no one's going to relate. But like they might not be able to relate to that specific thing that happened, but that
Right.
feeling that you have about it might actually be super relatable.
Right.
And sometimes people want that sort of specificity and that like personal like experience as a means to like, oh, it's going to connect with a wider audience in a way that you might not expect.
Huh. Yeah. Okay. You spoke in one of your specials about crowd work and the fact that the algorithm seems to love this thing that we used to think was kind of not hack, but it was kind of not the great part of stand-up. The most admirable part of stand-up was like good writing, good jokes. And stand-up was seen sometimes, unless you're like an MC or something like that, even then, it was kind of seen as this kind of eh thing that you do. And all of a sudden, it's the only thing on TikTok and Instagram Reels. So all of a sudden, everyone's posting crowd work clips. And I don't know if it's twofold because no one wants to burn the material, so they don't post the actual bits. And then also there's the algorithm just loves this sort of high wire act of, oh, what's going to happen? What do you think that is? And do you think it's going to like come around again where people actually want to watch bits?
Um, well, yeah, to me, it cracks me up when people are like, I don't want to burn that material. Because you know
Yeah.
what I say? Burn, burn it
Burn it.
away.
Burn it.
Like, you know what? Most of the world's never even going to see it in the first
Exactly.
place. So, like, spread it out there, put it out again. This idea that people are going to be like, oh, I'm so tired of hearing this joke again. Like, who are these super fans of yours that are consuming every single piece of material you put out and then attending shows and are going to be like, oh, wait a minute, I saw him do that. Like 3% of what I saw, I've consumed before online 12 months ago. And so now I'm outraged. It's such like an archaic mode of thinking. Like, you know what?
Yeah.
Write jokes, put them out there, keep
Yes.
doing them. No one cares. Like, it's nice to write jokes. Just write good jokes.
Yeah.
I just think crowd work, it's first of all, I'm not like opposed to it. It's just like it's weird to me that it did pivot into being like a dominant version of the art craft
Mm.
of the art, at least as perceived online by people who just see it on social media. And I
Yes.
think there's a couple of reasons for that. I think it's like, instantly, so much of comedy is like something that's relatable or that everyone understands the setup. And with crowd work, you have that built in. Like it's part of why it works in the room so much. It's like you don't have to
Right.
explain the setup. We all just saw that this couple said they're on their second date and one of them's into them more than the other one, or they're just friends, and you go, I bet one of you wants to bang the other one. And that will get a huge laugh every time because everyone in the room knows what's happening. But that doesn't mean it's good art. I also think the other
Right.
thing is like so many people online are just alone and on a screen all day, and they're just like, "Oh my
Yeah.
God, look at these two people who don't know each other interacting. Imagine what that's like."
Out of the house. Yeah.
There's a human conversation happening between strangers. Wow, it's almost like a magic trick now for a lot of society. Um,
Conversation.
yeah, and I don't know. I just think we're all just like being slaves to the algorithms, and I feel not great about having my entire art form pivot because it's what helps out Mark Zuckerberg and the Chinese government. I'm just
Yeah.
like, I don't want those people determining what makes good art, and I don't think um, they have our best interests at heart. I just think they're trying to capture our
Wait, come
attention.
on. Sure, I'm sure they do. I'm sure they absolutely care about all of us.
Well,
Come
by the
on.
way, yeah, in 10 years, we're going to be ruled by our Chinese overlords. So at this point, I'm a comedian. This is all a joke. I didn't mean it. Uh, I think Mao is great. Yeah, communism. Let's
Mao
go.
is great.
Yeah, he's underrated. The Red Book, great branding. I thought
Underrated.
the Red Book was like solid. I mean, talk about effective design, simplicity. It's up there with that Catcher in the Rye book cover. So I'm
Brilliant.
full Mao. You know,
Full Mao.
you go, Chi.
I'm putting that as the episode title. Matt
That's
Ruby is full Mao. You know what I've noticed is this interesting thing, and I know that you've really explored this, and this comes again from like when you, um, uh, I guess when you make people uncomfortable, they seized up. You did a special in 2020 and talked about cancel culture and not being able to say certain things, and not in a hack way that everyone can, oh, you can't say this. It was like in a genuine, you sort of delved into it, um, and people didn't know where you were going to go with it. You were like, I think men do some things better than women. And then everyone thought you were going to be a misogynist. And then you just went in a different direction. I'm not going to ruin the bit. But I've noticed that some audiences still seize up when they hear the topic of the joke instead of the like the target of the joke. And I used to do this very silly bit about China and about how repressive the regime in China was. And it used to get a pop. It would be like, learned a lot about China. They have a very popular TV show there. It's called So You Think You Can Think. And then, well, it's true. Google it. They can't. And then, so it used to be this thing where like people would laugh at it. And now sometimes it gets like an ooh. And I'm like, what are you oohing like Xi Jinping? Like, what are you oohing? Like, who is hurt by this joke?
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about it, you can feel that tension. To me, that's a golden opportunity. Like
Yes.
tension is opportunity, and it's uh, the worst thing that you can have is apathy. The worst
Yeah.
thing you can have is people tuning out. Tension is at the heart of good comedy and especially good stand up. Like laughter is tension released. So like when
Yeah.
you've got them feeling tense, that's not necessarily something to run away from. I think you got to build up the skill over time to manage it well. But to me, tension is like what the tension to a comedian is what waves are to a surfer. And so
Wow.
you've just got to learn how to ride them and use them. And that's actually like the whole goal, as opposed to being like something that you need to paddle away from. So I think,
Hmm.
when you've got that tension, like you're on the right path. Now just figure out how to convert it into laughter.
That's interesting. I never thought of it like that with waves. It's a good metaphor. I have heard maybe every metaphor for, for comedy because everyone has one. What was it? Jerry's superhero name from Larry not Larry David.
Charles?
Who was the Larry Charles used to call him Analogy Man.
Yeah,
The worst superhero in the world. Just Analogy Lad was his
that's
name.
funny. I mean, a big part of why I started doing stand up was I would think in metaphors all the time and like realize
Yeah.
like, oh, comedy is a good way to use that muscle.
Yeah, for sure.
And
I
I
mean
think
that's
Jerry's used surfing analogies before. Yeah, I'm big on like surfers and gardeners, even though I don't do either of those things. I think surfers and gardeners sort of understand the universe in some really depthful ways that the rest of us can learn from.
you have to expand on that.
I mean, I think they understand cycles. Gardeners understand seasons and having a fallow period and blossoming and planting seeds and nurturing
Sure.
things and how that will yield fruit and vegetables later on. And I think surfers understand just like the rhythm of the universe and waves and high tide and low tide and
Huh.
using the energy of the universe and enjoying when you're on the wave and also realizing the wave's going to end and it's going to crash over you and you're going to get smacked around by it, but that's also why you love it. And I think doing both those things will kind of show you the way and teach you what matters if you're a Zen wannabe like I am.
Right. Right. Everything that comes into being must then, yeah, entropy. It's
It forces you to be present. You can be attached to outcomes or all this other stuff, but you're still gonna have to put your hands in the dirt, and the wave's still gonna knock you down. That's just the way the
wow.
universe works.
Jeez, we're getting pound for pound, getting more wisdom in this chat than anyone's ever got on anything. This is fantastic. What else you got? I mean, gardeners, surfers.
Yeah.
You've got the water, the tension of the waves. What else you got? What's your favorite comedy analogy? I know there's
um,
a lot of them.
yeah. I mean, both those are beyond
Yeah,
comedy, but
sure. Those
I,
are
I don't.
existential.
I guess we were talking about music before,
Yeah.
and tension, and I love like Led Zeppelin or the Pixies or that
Mm,
sort of loud, soft, loud, that dynamic, and how one buys you the other. So being mellow and pretty can buy you the bandwidth to be loud and aggressive. Um,
right.
and that switch in dynamics is actually like something we crave instead of being one thing all the time. And I think that's something you
Huh.
see, maybe not in stand up, but in like filmmaking or one man shows. Like
Yeah.
being silly and dumb can buy you being deep and melancholy. I think you can see that in like Judd Apatow or Woody Allen movies or
Right.
things like that, where it's like, or even in like Louis stand up, where you might have something like the deepest philosophical bits, and then you're going to have like a fart joke, or Carlin would be like that too.
Yeah.
And so sometimes having like the silly, dumb stuff uh, can buy you like the goodwill of the audience to do something that's deeper, or maybe not as many like punchlines per minute, but maybe is going to help you like explain something that is to you important in the world.
Yeah.
I'm interested in dynamics and and then if you even want to take that to politics, this idea that like I feel like we have so much identity stuff going on all the time. Like this is who I am, or this is what I am, and I'm not even talking about like gender stuff. I'm just talking about like politically as your ideology, like I'm this or I'm that. And
Right.
I've increasingly started to feel, I mean, also politics is chaos now, but when
Yeah.
someone asks me what my political views are, I'm increasingly starting to feel like, well, whatever we've been doing, I want to do the opposite.
Yeah.
Whatever's been happening for the past like 5 to 10 years, I think we should go the other way. So then you start
Yeah.
getting into like Hegel or philosophy of like, maybe there's not one right answer, maybe there's two poles, and
Yeah.
the path to wisdom goes from alternating between these poles and going back and forth and swinging like a pendulum instead of just trying to, bully your way through like a battering ram.
Huh. Um, I think the philosophical angle, I think a lot of comedians gravitate to that, to philosophy and to those kinds of things, and political philosophy, and because it is trying to dissect and understand and fathom like just human behavior on a large scale. And like even and I don't think it's any mistake that a lot of Louis' bits that stick with you are are akin to like Pryor and Carlin, because they were some of his biggest influences, and you can tell in his act where he does oscillate between silly and serious and deep and shallow. Like there's everything in there for everyone. But when you are in the car on the way home, the bits that you often remember are those really big life bits, those very large things that just kind of stick with you. And in my head, I don't know, maybe I've always had a theory about this, but I don't know if it's true, is that interlacing those or interspersing the silly with the serious, or the high-minded philosophical with the sort of silly, shallow, shit jokes and dick jokes is kind of like, and I think you posted something that Chris Hayes wrote about this a little while ago, about every single aspect of human life is being reoriented around the pursuit of attention. I feel like there are these ebbs and flows, these waves of attention with an audience where you can't stay on one track for the whole time. You kind of do have to kind of go in and out of these waves of not just topics, but even just I guess you're conducting the audience, right? You're moving their mind around,
Yeah,
and I
I think
don't.
I
Yeah.
think of energy like kind of
Yes.
turning,
Yeah.
like shamans within psychedelic ceremonies will, yeah, this will be some hippy dippy stuff, but like turning the energy in a room.
Right.
That's something I've definitely seen. Like Dave Chappelle.
Oh,
Um,
sure.
I remember doing watching him do a set at Comedy Cellar and seeing him in a small room like
Yep.
that, really feeling like, oh, this is very shamanic in how he's using the energy and playing with it and like saying stuff that's
Yes.
like, so I don't know if offensive is the right word, but like things that are pushing the audience away, making them recoil, making them be like, I don't know about this at all. And then
Yeah.
masterfully like pulling them back in via laughter
Yes.
V. And he's such a great orator and so charming, like, and sort of using that push pull technique in a way that's like so captivating that I think it's part of why, the best stand-ups are people who've been doing it for 20 or 30 plus years. It's not
Yeah.
something that just, it's very difficult to just arise naturally with that ability. It's something that you gain over time. But yeah, I think there's definitely that sort of push pull. And then I also think about, like you're saying, it's just like these things just come together naturally in life. Like I think
Mm.
about um, like dying and the grieving process, or when and I think Sarah Silverman has a new special and talks about this a little bit. Um, but yeah, how during the process of death and grieving, how much of
Mm.
what this is something I've written about before, how much is hilarious or how much laughter there is, because we just can't
Yeah.
exist in that realm of tension all the time, 24/7 for weeks on end. That's just not who we are as animals. So the more you're in that sort of like tense, morose, somber sort of environment, invariably there's going to be stuff arises where just everyone's cracking up. And it could be like the dumbest thing, but when you
Yeah.
got all that tension, it's going to want to be released somehow. If you've got this balloon that keeps getting inflated, some pin's going to come along and pop it, and you're going to have laughter that goes with it. So I think there's some,
Huh.
natural rhythm or rhyming that happens between, this is, meditation or Buddhist stuff. Again, there's like a duality that's happening
Right.
where like happy and sad and serious and hilarious and, whatever opposites we have, whatever yin yang is going on, that there, just the way the universe works is that there's always going to be some pull towards the other end of that. And I think, good art and good comedy or whatever it is going to reflect that or like portray that in some way that an audience is going to resonate with.
Yeah. No, that's it's honestly some of the biggest laughs I think I've ever experienced have been during like a wake
Yeah,
or a funeral.
yeah.
Like
Because your
it's this
body's craving it. Your body can't just
yeah.
be like this like all the time forever. Eventually, you're just like, oh God, yeah, I needed that. So it's just like it's just like some kind of release that we all need from anxiety and tension and all the terrible stuff that's happening all the time. It's part of why I love stand up. I get to be in a room every
Yeah.
night with a room full of people who are not on their screens, who are aligned with a bunch of strangers, and who are
Yeah.
experiencing joy. And it's like, oh, thank God. It's like, yeah, this is how we're supposed to be, not online fighting with a bunch of strangers.
Yeah, this should be the rule, not the exception to it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it always struck me when you mentioned that on stage. I noticed you mentioned that on stage a bunch. Is everyone's in here? We're not on our screens. We're all paying attention. There's a room full of strangers. It's dark. It's maybe slightly uncomfortable. You're all drinking. It's this thing that we've had for so long as a people, this kind of communal
Forever.
thing
Forever.
forever as
Yeah.
a species,
Yeah.
and we've managed to cloister ourselves off into these little tiny little, even just ourselves and a screen. You said on a screen, but like the nature of comedy, which is why I think it's so special and why I'm so drawn to it, and as you say, you are too, is that it is that sort of special moment of everyone just being in the same place at the same time. And no two shows, even if it's the exact same comedians doing the exact same material, no two shows are ever going to be exactly the same. Not in an improv way, but in a little, just the energy of the room could be totally different. You could do a two-show night, and it's just seven is wildly different from the 9:30 or the 10. Like it's just up to the fates, as to how that's going to be. Which is the most exhilarating part about it for me is just like you could know your act back to front and know where every beat and every laugh is, and yet you get up there and you're like, oh, all right, that usually hits. Okay,
Yeah.
uh,
Well, the audience is your collaborator. So I mean,
yes,
you get up
yeah,
there and it's, yeah, oh, I'm in a band with you guys. All right, cool.
yeah,
Like, you don't know jazz. All right, I guess we can do this instead. But yeah, I mean,
yeah.
increasingly, I think it's the antidote to everything. And I mean, I'm not like a Luddite. I'm online all the time,
No,
blah, blah,
sure,
blah.
yeah,
But I think
I know that.
screens are isolating us and leading us to these algorithmic bubbles and, kind of creating so much like anxiety and uh, loneliness and tension and negativity. And then I think
Mm,
the antidote to all that is human beings getting in a room together and processing something at the same time in a way that their nervous systems are being synchronized. And that can be a comedy show, it can be a DJ, it can be a book club, it could be a choir, it can be praying, it could be an AA meeting. It's there's a reason all those things are nourishing to people and make them feel connected as human beings, because we're trying to feel like we're part of the forest instead of an individual tree. And I think
mm,
when we have that forest, that sense of community, there's something innately that we know inside that makes us feel like the world is okay and that we're connected. And it's kind of what we crave the most, and just sort of soothes us and gives us what we're craving, as opposed to being on screens all the time, which is just like pressing this button in our head where they can frack our brain stems and make us angry because it's a great way to monetize us. But in
mm.
the end, it's just leading us further down a downward spiral.
Yeah, no, I think it is the antidote. I do sometimes worry um, about where it all goes, where it all ends, but then I just think, hey, maybe there'll be a solar flare. You want to hope.
I mean, maybe I'm naive, but I have faith in rebellion. I think if people are
Mm,
miserable, eventually, like that bubbles up in a way that they're like, I don't want to do this anymore. So
mm,
I don't know. I think there's probably some path where you choose between robot or animal in the future. You can have your Neuralink, and AI will think for you, and you'll have your robot girlfriend and just have your goggles on and play a video game all the time, or you'll be an animal who has to deal with human emotions and not knowing stuff and getting lost. And we'll all have a path that we get to choose one way or the other. And I'll
oh
choose
my
getting
God.
lost.
Yeah, me too. I think I'd rather get lost than that alternative. Matt, this has been amazing. Thank you. This was exactly what I wanted to do with you today, is just get into the weeds on this. I love your Substack. Tell everyone where they can find it again, just in case there's people on the stream now that when we first talked about it.
Sure. My comedy Substack is funnyhow.substack.com. And then my personal one where I write essays and have lots of jokes and stuff, that's mattruby.substack.com. And then if you want to see my stand up, it's all at mattrubycomedy.com. And I'm around performing all the time. Come see me. Come say hey. Thank you for having me. Great questions and cool doodles, and I appreciate it.
Of course, cool doodles. That's it. Now that's when tonight when they bring me up, they're gonna say, "What do you want to say?" Like
He's a
Matt
he's a
Ruby
cool
said.
he's a cool doodler.
Cool, cool doodler. Thank you, Matt. And everyone check out his special Bolo on YouTube. It's really, really funny. I think it's your best one yet. So
Thank
congrats on that. Congrats on the Substack. And thanks a lot, Matt. And thank you everyone for tuning in. And I'll see you on Thursday. See ya.